Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. We're going to talk today about what to do if you're somebody who has a small business, you're an entrepreneur, but you don't really have a very good support system. And this is something that I am sometimes shocked by how many non-supportive people are sometimes surrounding business owners, and especially in the very beginning stages, because, once you've had success, well, then everybody's like, oh, I always knew you could do it. You know what I mean? But it's in the beginning stages when you feel the most vulnerable, when you're, scared the most about the decisions that you're making, when you feel probably the most unsteady because you're in a learning phase. It's then that I see mostly the women who are in my mastermind. But a lot of them, they're just not getting the support that they need. They're not getting the support that they need. And so I want to talk about that today. And I'm going to read for you in my mastermind. One of the ladies that's in here, she sent a message on Voxer the other day to the entire group of the women in my mastermind. And this is what prompted for me this idea of a support system podcast. So she said, what advice do you ladies have for talking with family members about my business? I know you're going to say, don't talk to them, but she says, ... I'm a first generation entrepreneur. And by the way, the first generation of anything, when you are the first ones in your family to do anything different, there's a saying that the first one through the window gets bloody. And I don't want to prophesy that over you, but I am saying that there's extra warfare that comes when you're the first. If you're the first one to go to college, if you are the first one to graduate from high school, if you are the first one to purchase a home, if you're the first one to stay married, if you're the first one to not declare bankruptcy, if you're the first one to be a business owner, you will go through extra things because the enemy of your soul is trying to make sure that there's not growth, that you're not fulfilling the call of God on your life, that you remain in stuck oppressive patterns. And so it will always be the one that is breaking generational curses and setting forth new generational blessings that's going to take the heat. Okay. And so that's some of you that are listening to me right now who are first generation business owners. I just gave you the 30-second version of why you have so much resistance to your business. It has nothing to do with your product. It has nothing to do with the fact that people are against you. It's the fact that you're first generation, and the enemy will use tactics and even work through people, well-intentioned, well-meaning, loving people, to discourage you. And it's usually always in the beginning because the enemy of your soul knows that he can stop things in the beginning. Then it's way, I think, less effort, because as you get further in and you have success and you're feeling a little froggy, I think it's harder to discourage you. This is also, by the way, why the enemy comes after our children in such a hard way, because if the enemy can get you in the beginning stages, then he's got you a lot of times forever. So back to, that was a hard turn. That was a rabbit trail. All right, squirrel. Let's talk about, back to when you're an entrepreneur, and let's talk about what I got on this Voxer message. Okay. So she said she's a first generation entrepreneur. And even when I share something good or exciting, a criticism always comes up. Sometimes there is a wisdom gain, but most of the time I just leave the conversation feeling deflated. I try not to over-explain. I talk a lot about how over-explaining is often a trauma response. People, a lot of times, women in particular, will over-explain if they have been very misunderstood in their past. If people even intentionally misunderstood them, because the thing is, when people decide to see you in a particular way, when people decide that you are a particular whatever, a lot of times they will intentionally misinterpret what you're saying. They will intentionally misunderstand you. And so often over-explaining is a trauma response, because in our heads, we are thinking, if I just give more context, if I just give more reasons, then maybe they won't dislike me. This all goes back to people pleasing, by the way. If I just give them a little more information, a little more context, a little more background, then they won't misunderstand me. Very rarely is that the case. So quit over explaining, over apologizing, because I promise you, it's not going to change the minds of the people that already think one particular way about you. Okie dokie artichoke. Okay. So she says, sometimes there's a wisdom game. Most of the time I leave the conversation feeling deflated. I try not to over explain, but questions are always asked. And so of course I share, but then it backfires. Okay. First of all, such big hugs to this woman in my mastermind. And it makes me feel mama bearish, if I can say that. It makes me want to somehow protect the women who especially are in my mastermind, because I know the warfare that they're going through. I know the challenges that they face. And it would be so amazing if the people closest to them could be supporters and not naysayers. The world is full of people who are going to come at you, people who are going to, be knuckleheads on social media. I think that if more people could just be supportive of even things that they don't understand when it comes to entrepreneurship, then it would just be so much easier on the entrepreneur. And so often they think they're doing it from a place of love. They think that, well, I need to forewarn you of the things that could happen. That way you don't walk into a landmine. Listen, you're going to walk into a landmine regardless of if you've been warned or not. It's kind of like for those of you that have children, remember how sometimes before you had kids, people would try to set you up for success. They would try to give you advice. They would try to tell you certain things. And in your head, you're like, yeah, okay, that's great. But it's not until you're actually in it that you're like, oh, shoot, this is what they were talking about. Or, oh my goodness, I wasn't prepared for this, right? Well, entrepreneurship is the same way. Owning your own business is the same way. And so you will step on landmines. And so sometimes well-intended, loving human beings that either live in your home or your family or friends, they'll think they're helping by saying, have you thought of this? And what about this? And, oh, the economy is about to crash and interest rates, and it's so hard, and Facebook's going to go under, and what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're doing it under the guise of thinking they're helping. And some of them, I think, legitimately think they are. But what do you do with that? That's what we're talking about today. Wow, that was a long intro. Okay. I just want to say, first of all, that some of you who are listening, you have amazingly supportive family and friends, and you need to praise God for that. And it would probably be appropriate for you to tell the people who are in your world, who have always believed in you, even when sales aren't coming in, even when you're just starting, even when you don't even know what you're doing. It would probably be a nice time to just send them a text and be like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for just always being supportive. When I think about my husband and the fact that I've been a business owner for 23 years, and there's been different, variations of what I've done. First, it was the painting company, and then it was doing a lot of webinars and stuff about the painting industry, and then it was selling DIY videos, and then it was starting to coach on social media in particular. Then I added a home line, that I've shut down. Then I've added a life coaching component. Then I added a mastermind. And when I think about all the kind of iterations of things, my husband has been incredibly supportive the entire time. Been so supportive. My number one fan has never told me he's concerned. This is ridiculous, anything else. And what a gift that is to me. And now as he's getting ready to launch his first business, Fairway Finest, his golf apparel company, I have the opportunity to try to support him in the same way. Now, that doesn't mean that he maybe hasn't ever had thoughts, and I'm not going to have thoughts, but what comes out of his mouth and what I feel is very supportive. And I pray that I can support him in the same way. And so when you think about just where we are at in, the breakdown of family in America, when you think about people who, are moving a lot, they get transferred from work, when you think about how there's just not a lot of that small town relationships, people are outside of the church, relationships are easily divided. People are leaving friendships and churches and families out of offense. When you think about that, I do think that it's harder for us to have very intentional relationships, which also means it's probably harder to find very supportive relationships. My team was giving me a stat that only 25% of Americans right now have help with their children from extended family. So 1 out of every 4 families has a aunt, uncle, sibling, grandma, grandpa that are able to help with the kids. And by the way, if you own a business and have children, you're going to need help at sometimes. You just are. And so my team is telling me they're actually calling us the sandwich generation, people that are my age, which is I'm 51, about to be 52. But a lot of us are supporting aging parents while also raising children. And so support is really needed as entrepreneurs, but often it's really hard to get from your family because you may have aging parents who don't understand the internet. They don't understand what you're doing. They don't understand that the world has completely changed. The education system has completely changed. Online education is the new, like, wild, wild west. They don't understand people leaving a job with a 401k and benefits. And so it's, I think, sometimes harder to get support. And so what is one to do if you don't get support from your friends and family? So I have a couple thoughts for you, okay? I think that the answer depends on who is not supporting you. So first of all, I'm going to just talk to the females right now. If you are a woman who's listening and you are married, let me just say that if your husband is not on board with some of the things that you're doing in business, I never suggest that you do it. You want his buy-in for so many reasons. Okay. The Bible talks about where there is unity, there's a commanded blessing, and you want unity in the marriage, which brings unity in the home, which brings unity in the family, which changes so many different dynamics. But nothing good can come from ignoring the advice or thoughts or, what have you from your spouse. Nothing good can come from that. Nothing good can come from you trying to manipulate them into seeing things your way and saying yes, even when they really think that the answer should be no. And so my suggestion is always this: the less you can try to do to convince and the more you can do to just give it to God and pray, the better off things will be. And I mean that, because the Lord and the Holy Spirit can change somebody's mind so much easier than we can try to as women, as spouses, or in any other relationship. And so pray that they would hear from heaven and that the Lord would convict them on their non-support and that they would be able to shift. And pray for an opening for conversations, and also check yourself. Because has your spouse tried to start something that you weren't supportive of? Has your spouse wanted to do something that you shut down? Because a lot of times spouses they'll mirror back to us often, the way we handled something. So if it's a spouse, proceed with great caution. Let me just say that. If it is extended family, like in the message I got from the woman in my mastermind, I have some pretty strong opinions, which you may disagree with, and that's okay. If it is your spouse's family, who are the ones who are saying the negative things, who are making you feel deflated, I think it's the responsibility of your spouse to step in. I do. I think he needs to be the one that says something to his family. He is your covering. He's called to be the leader and the protector of your home. I think that if it's his family that is doing the, non-support, and they're being very verbal about it and making you feel a certain way, and it's valid and he sees it, I think that he needs to step in, and he needs to be the one that says, "Hey, mom, listen," or "Hey, sister, listen." That's just my personal opinion, but I also think that comes underneath his position in the marriage. Now, if it's your family, I think you need to be the one that's bold enough to say something. And I think sometimes women just don't often have the vocabulary. And so that's one of the things, like in my mastermind, I try to give women ideas, thoughts, and something that they can, like, meaty, that they can grab and use. So I like to give them words. So let's say, for instance, you've got somebody in your family who's really discouraging you. It is not only okay, but I think necessary for you to say, "Listen, sis, every time we talk about my business and you say XYZ, it really hurts my heart. You discourage the heck out of me. I don't know if you know that you're intentionally doing this, or I don't know if you're even intentionally doing it. I don't know if you know that it's having that effect on me, but I want to bring it to your attention, because the way you make me feel when you say XYZ makes me not want to talk about this with you. It makes me want to shut down, and that's going to affect our relationship." Listen, friends, that is a valid conversation. If they think that they're like warning you of all the things that could go wrong in your business, I think it is valid to say, "Listen, I know that you love me, and I know you are thinking you're helping by saying X, Y, and Z. However, the truth is, I'm going to do this business whether or not you think it's a wise idea or not. I have already thought of all the things that you are scared of. And the truth is, deep down, I'm probably really scared of them too. But if you're going to try to discourage me every time we have this conversation, then I'd rather we didn't have the conversation. I've got to put up some boundaries to protect my heart, because you're hurting my heart when you are not supporting, but instead you're like throwing all of this at me that then I also have to carry in addition to my own fears. I think it's okay to say to the people who are in our world, listen, I'm doing this with or without your support. If you can't be supportive, we're no longer discussing it. I think it's not only okay, but also necessary to say, listen, I'm going to have to set a boundary that this is a topic we no longer discuss, because every time we do, whether you know you do it or not, you make me feel a certain way. Could be that I'm, misinterpreting your words. Could be that it's my issue. Could be that I'm just not ready to have these conversations. But while I'm in the beginning stages and I'm already feeling like X, Y, and Z, I just can't talk to you about it because it only adds additional feelings of fear. And so I love you, but let's just not talk about it to protect the relationship. Those conversations, I think, are so valid. And if it's not your family, but people that you're in friendship with, same thing. Ditto to what I just said. If it's your friends, have this conversation. I can remember when I was getting ready to start charging for my DIY videos, I had a very close friend who said to me, Jen, you've been giving away this information, this content for free for years. Why do you think somebody's going to start paying you for it now? And I was like, oh, sucker punch right to the gut. I was like, holy smokes, I never even thought of it from that angle. And so she planted a seed that hadn't previously been there. And I was like, oh my gosh, now listen, if I was to go back to her today, or even if I had said then, man, that stings a little, she would feel awful. I've never even brought it up to her. There's no need to, because I know that she thought that she was just helping me to see something from a different angle. And the truth is, if you'll actually look one step further below what they're saying, sometimes you can get a tiny bit of truth out, or sometimes you can learn something. Because in that case, I was like, oh my goodness, that's probably a really good point. I'm going to have to, in my marketing, figure out how to tell people what's different about this paid content than what was in my free content. Now I'm going to give you a supply list. I'm going to tell you exactly where I buy everything. You're going to have access to me to be able to answer your questions for you. Before, I was just giving you a snippet of the process. Now you get an entire video. Sometimes I think if we can look just a few steps deeper, we can actually pull something out of it that could be a gift to us. But if you're unable to do that, or there's literally no redeeming qualities about the things that they are saying, then have the conversation with them. I would love to just protect our relationship. So let's just not talk about my business until I'm in a better place emotionally and you can be fully supportive. The other thing I would say is that you have got to be intentional, business owners, about finding a supportive entrepreneurial community online, one that shares your values, and one that's going to support you, give you, high fives, give you advice, be a non-judgment zone. But I do think that it's impossible to discuss things that are business related with people that have never owned a business. There's this quote from Brené Brown. It's one of the only Brené Brown quotes that I really even know. I don't read Brené's books or anything. She's, I know she's got a lot of really great, smart things that she says and has put out into the world, but I'm just going to read the one that I read one time. And I actually watched a video about it on YouTube. So if you're watching me right now on YouTube in this podcast, you can go Google this, just Google Brené Brown, in the arena, and you'll find the YouTube video. But basically she says this: if you are not in the arena getting your bleep butt kicked on occasion, I'm not interested in or open to your feedback. There are a million cheap seats in the world today, filled with people who will never be brave with their own lives, but they will spend every ounce of energy they have hurling advice and judgment at those of us who are trying to dare greatly. Their only contributions are criticism, cynicism, and fear-mongering. If you're criticizing from a place where you're not also putting yourself on the line, then I'm just not interested in your feedback. Again, that's a Brené Brown quote. Now, I know that sounds harsher than probably what some of you are willing to say to family and friends. But what I want you to know is that not only can you say something, but I believe that you should say something. If God has given you the vision and the talent and the desire to build a business on this side of heaven, he's probably also given you a platform or an influence of some kind, then it's your responsibility to steward that. And sometimes that responsibility includes protecting yourself from the critical words of people with no experience in what you're doing. And some of them are just not for you. They're just not. And listen, business is too hard for A, for you to do it alone, and B, for you to do it with people who are just, they like to throw word grenades at you. Life's too short for that. Business is too hard for that. So find other people to talk to, shut it down with the wrong people, and find the right people that you can have business conversations with. You've heard me talk about my mastermind. You can go look at what my mastermind includes at creatorsnextlevel.com. We meet several times a year, twice a year. Why did I say several? We meet twice a year in real life. We're getting ready to meet in November here in Kansas City. And I can tell you that one of the biggest benefits the women in the mastermind talk about is the fact that they get to have in-person meetings with people who are in similar spaces. They might be in completely different industries, but these are all women who are building a business in the online space. And they're around other women who get it, who get it. So if you're interested in my mastermind, go to creatorsnextlevel.com. But here's what I'd like to just end with. Big hugs to all of you who are doing things afraid, who are doing things without feeling like you have a lot of support. I do believe that the concept of reaping and sowing is valid in this conversation too, because you just cannot get away from the biblical concept of reaping and sowing. We will reap what we have sown. And so even if other people are trying to discourage you and they're trying to help by warning you, etc., make sure that you are sowing something different into the lives and businesses of somebody else. Wherever we have a need, like if you have a need for finances, sow into somebody else's business. If you have a need for sales, if you are needing engagement on your social media, sow into somebody else's business. Start engaging on other people's content, because you will reap what you sow. And so if you're really needing some relationships that are encouraging and you're needing people in your world to be encouraging, make sure you're the one doing the encouraging and you're also building up others. Okay. All right, friends. I hope this was helpful for you today. If you are watching on YouTube, leave me a lovely comment below if you would. And I'll see you next week, friends. Bye-bye. Done for today. D-U-N, done. Ha-ha! Easton, you better put some of these outtakes on YouTube because I'm funny.